Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to season 2 of Conversations in Pop Culture, where I have with me professional wrestler Jessie Nolan, who is legitimately brand new to wrestling. And I mean like 3 matches brand new. So I'm very excited to have you on.
Well,
And welcome to the show.
thank you very much.
Yeah, so I kind of just tip my hat where I am super excited. You've obviously had a few matches down, and I stated 3, maybe 4 at the most at this point that
Yes.
have been out there. And before we get into all that, and instead talking about a lot of that, I am really curious how you got into wrestling because you are so new and you got hopefully a long career ahead of you.
Well, yes, I definitely hope so. Oh, sorry. This is Nolan. Um, okay, so I started watching wrestling growing up. I would see my dad like every other weekend, and he would always have Friday Night SmackDown on. And it got to the point where I got excited to go to my dad's house that I could watch wrestling. And I just really loved it. And then I started watching it on my own and I started getting like super into it and like started, looking more into it, like studying the wrestlers and starting learning all the move names and stuff like that. And I kind of took a break from watching for a few years when I went off to school. You know, I just bored.
And exactly what I hope we didn't have.
I don't know what just happened.
Well, you cut off right at school, and sometimes that happens. It's the internet,
Okay.
and it's probably me. It's probably not you because it's always my fault, and I totally accept the blame. So any internet problem, whether I'm in your house or I'm not, is most likely my fault. So
Okay.
just speak about how you sort of were watching on your own, and then you went off to school.
Yes. So I went off to school and I wasn't really watching as much. I would keep up on social media with like the WWE product. But once I graduated, I started watching it again and here and there. And my sister actually would started going to indie shows and she would tell me about these shows and I'm like, oh, I gotta go sometime. I gotta go sometime. And so I had gone to one a couple years back, and I actually saw Danger Kid on that show. I saw Calvin Strange. I saw Luke Robinson, who's actually a friend of mine. And so this is now we're at 2019, like March of 2019, and my sister gets me to go to a Limitless Wrestling show because Tommy Dreamer was there, and I love Tommy Dreamer. So I'm like, I can't miss that. So I go to this show, and I was just like in awe. Like it's just that energy there. I will never forget it. Like I've told Randy Carver, that the owner of Limitless, a bunch of times. Like that show made me fall in love with professional wrestling again. And so I actually met Randy a couple months later, no, maybe like a couple weeks later, at a bar after another indie show. And, I had found out at that point that he had a school. And so I was like, oh, yeah, Randy, you ought to let me come wrestle, like not thinking anything of it. And he's like, yeah, of course, come do it. I was like, oh. So I actually was in school again at that point. I waited to graduate like a month later, and then the next week I was there, and I've been there ever since. And that was, gosh, almost 2 years now. It'll be 2 years in May. I can't even believe that.
So there's a lot to unpack there. So obviously you left watching wrestling, you come back, and then you sort of got into the indie scene where you went from WWE, or in my day it was Impact WWE. Now for all those people out there, it's AEW WWE, and then you got into an indie show, and then from there, obviously you met Randy, and then he sort of got you to do training. So what was that like going from that trajectory and now becoming and then getting into training, I guess, and how did that all work? 'Cause that's an interesting journey in of itself.
Yeah, I mean, I was obviously a big fan of wrestling, but the transition for me from fan to train was it was weird. Like it was I personally I still like not knowing the card at shows. I don't like knowing like anything that's gonna happen because like I still want to have that fan aspect. Um, but you know now it's like sometimes when I go to these shows I don't even get to watch the matches because I'm working behind the scenes like doing stuff like you know helping with whatever needs to be helped with. But that was kind of a hard transition at first because like obviously I just want to sit there and watch wrestling, you know. But I love it. Like I love everything about it. I love the responsibility like of you know being kind of like the ring crew. That's kind of our job as trainees right now. Um, but yeah, I've gotten used to it. I've gotten used to watching wrestling differently than I did before.
And we're going to talk about that because one of the things about Limitless is that you have been in the crowd watching matches. And we're going to talk about that because that also is a very interesting dynamic. But we're going to table that for 1 second because obviously you come in, Randy obviously got you in the ring. And so, what was that like on day one between the physical side? There's the mental side of wrestling, there's the selling side, there's also just understanding the concept. So what was all of that like? Because that's obviously the dojo up at Limitless, and that's kind of what they do. And so, what was that entire mentality like for you, and how was your training broken up? And I don't know what you caught of that.
I you basically were getting at like what day one was like
Yeah, what was day one like coming into this ring and all the physical side and the physical stuff with the wrestling and really starting to train there? And because obviously wrestling training, for those who don't know, is broken up with physical stuff. It's also broken up on a mental side as well as a selling side. And so, what was that like coming in? Because obviously, I hope all of that wasn't bombarded with you on day one.
um, yeah, so my first class was actually with Alexander Lee. It was me, him, and Mac Daniels. There was just the three of us. And I, at that point, had never stepped foot in a wrestling before in my life. And so I literally had to ask Alexander Lee to teach me how to get into a wrestling ring. um, you know, we went over like some bumps. So, like, basically teaching yourself how to fall properly without getting seriously injured. Um, and we it's very a very simple first class because like I was new and I'm sorry, my dogs are being very rude right now and running around. Um, and I just I don't know. I left that day and I was like, oh my goodness, this is a lot.
Did you have a moment where you're like, what the hell did I get myself into?
Kind of, yes, but also at the same time, I was like, I'm finally here. Like I finally made it to living out a dream that I've had since I was a kid.
And so to even build off of that, because now obviously you're training and you're learning holds, and I think what people don't understand is that it's not just learning the holds; it's also being in the right type of shape. You know, getting your cardio up is massive in a wrestling ring. I don't think people understand, and the analogy I use is that skating and ice hockey is super, super exhausting. And wrestling a 10-minute match is very similar in that way as well, where if you're not in shape or you've been sitting out for 6 months, you know, that first one back is going to be tough. And so it's that, but also it's learning how to keep yourself safe and other people safe as well. So what was like even just learning because you were starting off with nothing except being a fan. I think that's a safe assumption.
Yeah, so I mean, I have a little bit of an athletic background. Like I played basketball and softball and all that. Like I played soccer, just different sports. Um, But at that point, I was lifting weights sometimes, but not very seriously. And so I wouldn't say that I was very in shape. My cardio was terrible. And so just starting there was really a kick in the butt to get into the gym. So I started in May of 2019. I started going to the gym in August, so 3 months later. Just from May to like maybe October, it was a huge, huge difference because I was putting in the work outside the ring, and just it made what was happening inside the ring so much easier. And people go into it and they don't realize, like you said, they don't realize how actually physical it is. Like, it is hard work. It,
Ropes hurt. Ropes hurt.
they do. They really do. And it's like, there are people who just go in as fans and don't take it seriously. That, like, they just see it as, oh, I can go and try to be a wrestler, and they don't put in the work outside the ring, and then it doesn't work out for them. And so I realized how important it was to start putting in that work. And, it not only makes it easier to wrestle, it also makes it easier on my body because, I'm growing more muscle, and I am, getting my cardio up. So I'm not super, super, super sore every time I, get home from training or have a match or anything like that.
You're also building up calluses to some degree as well, and then you're getting, skin tougher. I had Bro Keller on, and he was explaining that to me a
Yep.
few nights ago. And so obviously after a bunch of bumps, your skin gets a little bit tougher also.
Yep.
And so to talk about the other side, because obviously that's a lot of the physical side, and mental stuff does play into that. But what was that like? Because that's all the promo stuff and the selling, and even just the fortitude and understanding what you're doing in a ring, because that's more of a psychological aspect in many ways, which I think people forget that wrestling is psychological.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am actually a very shy person, believe it or not. And so actually the mental aspect of it hurt me. Oh, you're back. Okay.
This
Um,
is completely my fault. I'm well aware of it. It's completely my fault. I know it's my fault right from the start. Only my internet is not cooperating with me today, so that's the problem.
it's fine. I just waited out until you come back on the screen. So yeah, the mental part was really hard for me because, they at one point, like a few months into it, they're like, all right, you're gonna cut a promo. I'm like, uh-oh. And like, you have to like kind of be a bigger version of yourself when you're in the ring, and you really have to have, you know, um, be loud and be vocal and be, you know, for me, it's like I always try to be on fire. Um, and it's hard. It's definitely hard, but it's pushed me honestly to have more confidence in myself, just even in my everyday life. Like, I feel like I'm a more confident person. I'm not afraid to, like, you know, kind of speak up a little bit more.
And so even that, because obviously that takes a lot of practice too. This is my 200th plus interview. When I started doing this 5 years ago, it was not easy. And it took me about 50 interviews to get really good at this.
Yeah.
And then I'm now inflating my ego purposely. But I digress where I think I'm above average. I don't think I'm like super great at it. And there's a long journey for me. But the point I'm making is that it takes a while to really get this. And I think that people don't understand with promos and other stuff. And that's hilarious. That obviously it takes time to learn how to do this. So what was that entire practice like? Because that's very different than just working in a gym. And it's even harder for you, I would imagine, given that you're shy and that it's like you're in a wrestling ring, and I don't think you face the problem yet where you have to convince a crowd in person, but obviously that's going to be coming sooner rather than later because
Right.
of COVID.
Right. Um,
But you
yeah,
still have the internet to deal with.
Yeah. So, the biggest thing that has helped me with, being having that aspect of wrestling is, guys, sorry, um, is just letting go of any fear that I have and just starting, oh my word, sorry, just starting with a clean slate, like just not being afraid to just let go. Because when you're in training, nobody's judging you. And they want you to try different things. They want you to try to push yourself to, do great promos and think of things off the top of your head that you wouldn't normally. And luckily, I have a very supportive place to train. And they're all very like willing to help, and they're not gonna laugh at you if you mess up in a promo. You know what I mean?
Yeah, let's talk about Limitless, this dojo, and we're going to talk about Danger Kid in a minute.
Okay.
He's going to get a big plug here for what he does, but obviously Limitless Dojo, their entire training school is fascinating. I know that Eric Johnson, I think, is very much involved in that as well. And so what was that entire vibe like and experience like? And we spoke about it a little bit, but obviously they really take interest in their students and they don't push anybody into a match because you're carrying their brand on your back in many ways. And
Yeah.
they're the type of school that also you go to their school and then they want you on a limitless show. It's not like they don't have essentially what their school is that it's almost a sister to their promotion.
Yep. So first of all, it was when I had asked Randy who the trainers were at the dojo, he said Mainstay Posse, which was also Alexander Lee at the time. So both of them and Alexander Lee, Calvin Strange, and then Eric Johnson actually came in a little bit later on. Now he teaches more regularly. And we've had, August Gray comes every so often. I mean, before he got signed, he was here a lot more, but we'd have classes with him sometimes. But he told me that, and I'm like, oh my gosh, because I was coming into this as a fan. Like, I was still in that mindset of they're these big professional wrestlers that I just saw on my first Limitless show like 2 months ago, and I like already love them and like are huge fans. But so that was definitely humbling. But yeah, so I said after my match with Danger Kid that I had been training for 15 months. And part of that was when the school shut down and we couldn't train at all for about a month or so. But my trainers and Randy really took the time to work with me and make sure that I was ready to put on a match that, nobody was going to forget. And that's what they do with their students. Like, they don't want to just push wrestlers out the door, get their product. They want good quality wrestlers. And that is something that I really love about the dojo, because they really care about us and they really want us to succeed, and they're not going to let us, you know, put ourselves into a position where we're going to look bad.
Yeah, let's talk about that because I have interviewed August Gray twice at this point, and I will never interview him again, which is a good thing. It's a good thing, and he knows why because obviously I don't want him to be leaving WWE anytime soon.
Right.
Which means because I'm not big enough to play everybody in WWE's sandbox yet. Um, but maybe someday that'll be the third interview. So if you ever see him on my show again, we obviously know what's happened. But I digress right there. And that guy is just a wrestling encyclopedia by definition. And so is Chris Levin. Those two are probably the two smartest people on the indies in wrestling, or were. Obviously, August Gray is signed to WWE, but Chris is still around. Just throwing it out to two people that I know are brilliant at it. But more importantly, let's talk about Danger Kid because I know that you and Danger Kid are close, and obviously Danger Kid trained you. And so, what was that like, along with Mainstay Posse? And so, what was that like training like and that push like and that relationship like? Because obviously it led to your first match.
Yeah. So, first of all, Danger Kid is awesome. He is
You're not paid to say that, right?
no, no, no. I think he's great. He's a really great trainer. He really pushes you to try things that you wouldn't normally try. Same thing with AG. He would do that with me too. Um, but Danger Kid, he focuses a lot on the cardio aspect of wrestling, which is great because a lot of the students, including myself, need more cardio in our
You
lives.
need to be whipped into shape. Yeah,
Uh,
I think it's a good way to put it.
yes, yes, exactly. And Danger Kid definitely does that. But just having my first match with him, like that interview that I had after that match, like that was like me saying all those things. Like I when at the end of our match, when he, told me he was proud of me and like we shook hands and all that, I was almost in tears because I was just so happy that I got to share the ring with him for my first match and I got to, we took each other to our limits and we have worked so closely together, especially through the summer, that it just meant so much. And um I really, I love all the trainers there, honestly. I really do. They're all really great and they all are good at different things. Like they all have their own different teaching styles, and I think it's really great that we're not just learning the same things over and over again.
So let's talk about this entire match. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, because obviously this is your first match coming out to this. Nobody knows who you are at the time. I think the week before, Danger Kid sort of hyped it up a little bit. So
Yeah.
obviously there was some promotion going into this. There was some build up to it. And obviously there's no fans, but everybody's watching on the internet on Wednesdays, Limitless Wrestling.
Mhm.
And that's for a variety of reasons. Obviously, Beyond is on hiatus, and there was just a big void of wrestling for a while, and now everybody wants to see it again. So
Yeah.
obviously, there's a lot of eyes on you, and you now have this hype, and then now we have Danger Kid, and everybody knows who Danger Kid is. So what was that entire situation like for you? Because you're coming into, I don't want to say like a hostile territory, but a bit more of a pressure territory versus saying, most people have a dark match as their first match, or they're like the second match in the card. And I'm going to say it in the nicest way, but they're almost a placeholder or a cooler match in
Mhm.
many ways.
Mhm.
Here, you're in a position where I don't think Limitless has any cooler matches, but obviously you're in a pressured match where there's this nice big hype. And it's like, oh, here you are. And now you're with more or less the face of Limitless at the moment.
Yeah, I was definitely under a microscope at the time, and it was very, very nerve-wracking because, like, it was on IWTV, which is one of the main independent wrestling streaming sites, and
Pretty much
it
one or
was
two.
against,
Yeah,
yeah, it was against Danger, who, is a big part of Limitless, a big part of
he
the indie
opens up the
scene.
show, everybody. He opens up the show. Like, you can't get any bigger. Like, obviously, AG used to open up the show, and then Danger Kid took that because AG got signed, and now Danger Kid opens up season two. And it's just like, oh, and then you're thrown into this. I mean, how can it not be a high pressure situation?
Yeah. But at the same time, like it was very nerve-wracking, but also it was very um gratifying because they trusted me. My trainers and Randy trusted me to put me in that position. They trusted me to go out there and have a good match with him. They trusted me to, put on a performance that would make them proud. And so I just like, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. Like, I'm so grateful that I got that opportunity. And that was a huge opportunity for me.
Yeah, and and I don't even think you fully understand it, to be honest, as a fan. And I don't say this to be mean, but obviously most people in their first match want this type of situation
Yeah.
because here you have a bunch of people watching it. Now, I don't have Limitless's numbers, but I know that they do very well on Wednesdays. You know, they're in the right time slot. Not to throw over two promotions here, but NXT and AEW come on right after Limitless Wrestling. So
Yeah.
there's no conflict with that. People love indie wrestling. People tweet at in Limitless all the time. And so obviously this is probably the best launch you could possibly have as an indie star at the moment. And so what was that like? Because a lot of people figured out who you were within legitimately one match versus having to do like 30 of them all at once. And so this is a big an accelerant in many ways.
Yeah. I don't know. It was
I
just
would be terrified, just saying.
no, when I got in the ring before our match, I was like, this is going to make or break me. Like there's so many eyes on me. This is really like showing everybody who I am and what I'm made of, like just starting out. And um, you know, I like I said, I'm a very shy person, and so another aspect of wrestling that was really um like I needed to get used to was all of the exposure. Like I'm a very private person.
So let me ask you, and sorry for cutting you off, but were you expecting that exposure? Because it is very different now with the internet and COVID and all that stuff. Where I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is my opinion, where now Twitter exposure for wrestlers is bigger than ever.
Hmm.
And I think that a year and a half ago it was big, but it wasn't bigger than it is now.
Yeah.
And it's also significantly more important. And so were you ready for that exposure? Because that's a whole different game that I don't think they teach you in wrestling school and in your training, you know, and we don't teach it in society in general either. Just to throw that out there.
Yeah. I knew what I was getting myself into. Definitely. Like I still try to keep my personal life very private, but I knew that I was about to be like,
Followed
yes,
on Twitter.
exactly. And like we actually have had a couple classes at the dojo just on social media, just because it's such an important part of being an independent wrestler and getting noticed and getting seen. And so that was something that I actually put a lot of focus in before I had that match. I made an Instagram, I made a Twitter, I made a Facebook, like I was putting things on there. I was putting training things, gym videos, like everything I could so that, I didn't just like debut and then throw all my social media out there and like there's nothing there.
Yeah, your Facebook's pretty clean. Your Facebook page is pretty clean. You have like a bunch of good stuff up there. I like that Trevor Murdoch photo I saw.
Yeah. Yep.
Just throwing that out there, and it's old school WWE tag team wrestling. Just throwing it out there. I enjoyed him as a tag team wrestler. Not gonna lie, and
Yeah.
that should date me how old I am. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I watched him as a kid, so
So now even going past this, and obviously the match, you're pretty much over at this point. And then in the crowd, though, because Limitless, what they do with their crowds, and I'm really curious how you felt about this, is that they had the entire locker room more or less is now sitting as fans.
yep.
And so what was that like? Because you're wrestling in front of the locker room. You're in some degree showing off and proving why you belong. I don't know if you viewed it that way, but that's how I view it as a fan, is that when everybody's wrestling in front of each other, they're showing why they belong there and what they can do to everybody else and to the locker room to some degree. And I think it's a nice touch by Limitless, and I don't know if that was their intention or not, or give more of a fan vibe, but that's how I view it. And obviously, your first match is in front of all these other wrestlers. So, what was that experience like? Because it's very different than being in front of a bunch of fans who have paid for a ticket. I don't know if you caught all that.
Um, most of it, yes.
I'm just curious, what was your experience like wrestling for what you didn't catch in front of your fellow wrestlers outside? Because that's how Limitless does their shows right now, and I think it's a cool concept. I actually like it a lot. I think it's smart. I think it adds a fun vibe to it. But at the same time, you're also showing why you belong to some degree, is how I view it.
Yeah. That definitely put some added pressure on performing well in the match because all my peers were out there, all potential opponents, potential tag team partners. Like, there were we had a lot of wrestlers on the road, and they were not only around the ring but looking backstage in the changing area. They watch from there too, so you don't see everybody that's actually watching the matches. And um but if I think obviously I feel good about the situation because I feel like I had a good match, and like I earned.
You were over. Stop being humble. You were fucking over. Just stop it. Like,
I feel like I earned some respect, and I kind of, you know, I
just,
sorry,
just say you're over. Just, like,
I
so,
gained some Jessie Nolan fans that day.
and then I felt you're over, as I stated. And then what I felt though is that, so you're over in the match, and if you stop there, it would have been great. But then you go back and you do that interview with, I think, Ethan, if I'm correct.
Yeah,
And then we have this great promo that now you can massively build over, and then you get yourself over again in that backstage interview. And what makes this even better is that you're shy, and obviously we talk about doing good promos, like that happened. And so, what was that like, really kind of going behind the scenes and the emotion, and now actually creating a human connection?
yeah. So I like literally went downstairs and did that promo right after the match. And so I was still like had that kind of match high, and it was all just I was just speaking from the heart. Like it was just very sincere, and um I just I was just so grateful in the moment. Like I was proud. I was proud of the match. I was proud of myself. I was proud of Danger Kid for, helping me put on a good match. And so that just kind of all poured out, and I spoke from the heart, really.
Yeah, and I think that also captured a bunch of fans. I also think it's a really good piece for other promotions to look for to book you when things get somewhat back to normal. And I think that it shows that you have mastered the way to do promos, you're solid in the ring, and I think both those things are needed now for professional wrestlers. I think it's something that a lot of people, and considering that you're new, I think that's something that anybody wants to get into wrestling, or even a bunch of wrestlers who are like 4 or 5 years in, need to remember they need both skill sets.
Yep.
And so now I want to flip it around, because while all your peers were watching you during this match, you also got to watch a bunch of your peers too.
Yes.
So, and I'm going to give a little inside baseball. And CPB was talking about this because he was on as my second interview for season 2, and Devontae's was the first one, and they were back to back. So they were a super interview, if you will. But what he was explaining is that, and Delmy also explained this, is that you guys do all your tapings. If you have like 3 matches, those get taped in a day or two, back to back, and then it gets sort of put together behind the scenes a little bit on what match comes where and whatnot. And so obviously that's why there's wrestlers in the crowd, and you have to watch a bunch of people wrestle. And so what was that like? Because I know that you got to watch, Christian Casanova wrestle, and Alec Price, who's coming on tomorrow, and a few other people. And obviously you're a new wrestler, and the way I learned is I watch people and I imitate people and I see how they do it. But also it's fun to watch your peers, and you're sort of watching, I guess, an exclusive wrestling show to some degree at the same time too. So like there's 2 things going on, where technically you're working and technically you're learning, but at the same time you're also getting to watch wrestling before the rest of all of us fans on IWTV get to watch it.
Yeah, I love that part. It's so much fun. The weekend that we tape, like when you're not in the ring, you're outside the ring just watching wrestling for hours. And it's so great. Like I did get to see Christian wrestle like Ace. Last season AG was there. Um, and I honestly, the tapings are great because lots of wrestlers that I have never even met before are there, and I
A
get to,
lot of talented people, Delmy,
yeah,
AG, Davian,
yep,
Ashley Vox is another one. Alec Price is a guy to watch out for.
yeah,
There's a reason why I'm interviewing him tomorrow. Ace, as you stated. I'm trying to think of other people in Limitless who are great. I mean, obviously Danger Kid, Mainstay Posse. Um,
right.
make the argument Eric Johnson. Eric Johnson is underrated, but guy is so good.
Mhm.
Um, Rick Bison. That's another good name to throw out there. Good old Tomahawk. That's old school New England wrestling right
Oh,
there.
yeah, I met him when he was still Tomahawk.
Going deep, guys. Going deep here. And I used to live in D.C. and I know that. So clearly,
Yeah, it's just a lot of fun. Like I get to see a lot of different wrestling styles. I get to get ideas and like see different things that I like and things that might work for me and my style. And I love watching wrestling in general. Like I mean, like I mentioned earlier, I watch it differently now than I did as a fan because like now I'm looking, I'm trying I'm trying to learn. Sorry, hug right there. Um, I'm trying to learn from what I watch. Like I and enjoy it at the same time, but um,
it has to change your perspective though, because
yeah.
I'll speak from my experience. So I love Joe Rogan. I love Howard Stern. I love different interviewers. Enjoy Larry King. And now when I hear all these people doing interviews, and even when I watch, talk host shows, and I'll pick like The View for instance, because I think it's a little bit left, but I don't want to alienate everybody here. But obviously, I think they're somewhat down the middle. I view everything differently now because I'm like, oh, I know what they're doing, versus, before 5 years ago, I'm like, oh, I don't know what they're doing exactly. I kind of get a little bit of their tonality, but now I see it all differently. Like when I listen to Joe Rogan, very different where I understand how interviews are structured. I
Hmm.
understand what's occurring. And so for me, I enjoy it. I enjoy when people do it, but I also understand how it changes. And I would imagine that's somewhat similar for you as well.
Yeah, and it's also very inspiring. Like it inspires me to work harder because I get to see all these amazing wrestlers for hours on end for an entire weekend that I look up to and I respect tremendously. And I it just like makes me want to work harder and makes me want to wrestle more and go to the gym more and like, just practice more um and yeah, it's so just everything about the road and the tapings is just really awesome.
Yeah, let's talk about that because I think two companies that have adapted very well with IWTV, and I think they've saved IWTV, are Limitless Wrestling and ICW No Holds Bar. I think that those are the two companies. Obviously, John Wayne Murdoch is the Independent Wrestler of the Year. That guy is unbelievably good. And I think also Camp Leapfrog, which is occurring right now. For those who are interested in watching me and not watching that, I appreciate your viewership. Um, but I think those three things have adapted extremely well during COVID. And so obviously the road with Limitless, the entire name and that entire concept and what they did with AG and his road all the way up was brilliant in so many ways. And I think they got away with murder. I could tell Limitless won that war versus WWE, and I like both companies still. But I think in many ways it's brilliant, and I think also they're giving a lot of wrestlers opportunity. And so, what is that like for you that you were included in that show for a match? Obviously, we're in season 2. I don't know if season 2 has an end date or just might continue forward, or if we're gonna get, or if they stop and take a month off, we're gonna get a season 3 at some point. So, what has that been like for you? Obviously, having that out there and even having the opportunity to be part of that, because obviously it is a game changer in the middle of a disaster.
Yeah.
To put it politely, I have another word that's not as polite.
Yeah, it's been like, I'm just really thankful. I'm really thankful that I train where I train. I'm really thankful for Randy Carver. Honestly, like he is a genius when it comes to wrestling, and I'm grateful that he decided to try this out, try something different. I'm grateful that he's so passionate about wrestling that he wanted to do that and wanted to give wrestlers the opportunity to be seen and to still wrestle even though there's a pandemic going on. Um, Randy is a huge support for the wrestlers that, wrestle for him, not just his students. He always takes people under his wing and he always tries to give them more and more opportunities. And so, just look at the road, look at all the wrestlers that have been on there. Randy reached out to the majority of them and asked them to be on the taping. And to give them that platform and give them that opportunity. And so I definitely, it's not something that I take for granted. I have a lot of friends. My best friend actually has been wrestling for, oh gosh, 15 years. And he has never seen an opportunity like that because it's just it was a different time back then. And so my match on YouTube with Danger Kid, I just checked the other day and it has 65,000 views. So just that alone, like with all these wrestlers that are getting these matches and getting these views, they're getting seen and they're getting opportunities that people who have been wrestling for a really long time have never gotten. And so it's just, like I said, I don't take it for granted. I'm very thankful for it. And I think I can speak for um, probably all the wrestlers that have been at that taping that they are grateful for that too.
Yeah, and I think that Limitless is going to be one of the promotions in the next year or two that's going to be very much what is known as a launcher type of promotion where they're going to launch a lot of people's careers. I mentioned several people already who they're going to be launching, and I could probably go through like 4 or 5 more who are now going to be getting attention. I think you're in that group. Alec Price obviously is the first one that comes up. Christian Casanova is another one.
Yep.
Very, very much so, who's been undiscovered and probably has been, the three of you in many ways have been overlooked. I mean, you haven't been overlooked yet. You're still new, but very much. You have about 6 months before you're starting to get overlooked, but that's how I view it. But having said all that, I do want to talk about COVID a little bit. And I lost her. And I lost her. It's not good. And I'm waiting. Oh boy, this is not good. Not good. There we go. I think we fixed the problem. Clearly, the internet's not on my side today. Clearly.
It's okay.
Just as I was saying, I think Limitless in many ways, just to reiterate, is very much going to be launching for your career and several others. But I am curious, and I do want to talk about COVID because I think COVID has been very much a game changer in wrestling. I think Limitless has adapted extremely well, as I mentioned before, and obviously the road with everybody in the crowd and wrestlers in the crowd and doing and taking those risks of not maybe not risks, but taking what is a bad situation and having not fan shows, but still having wrestling and having those pre-tapings has been a big adaptation. So I am curious how COVID has affected you, how it's affected the wrestling business, because you're obviously on the inside and I'm on the outside, and people who watch and listen to this show are, for the most part, on the outside as well. So we all view it differently, what's going on and how it's all working. So I'm curious how it has affected you.
Yeah. So one big thing is I definitely would have made my debut long ago, much more in the past than I did. But I think the biggest thing about COVID right now is it's showing who really wants this. Because the people who really want this are still putting in the work. They're not just taking a break just because there's no shows. Like, they're still, and that's one thing that Randy is looking for. The people that he's booking on his tapings are the people he knows want this and are working at it and want to work at it. And it sucks. It really sucks that there's not a lot of shows going on right now. I mean, they're starting to come back, few and far between, and it's just not the same. But, there's that, and there's just the fan aspect. Like, I've wrestled on 2 shows now that have had crowds, um, and it's just 50 people.
Clearly my headset doesn't like me.
There we go. I got taken over while you were gone. Okay. We're gonna try this.
They clearly have their own opinion about what's happening today.
They're not liking that I'm not paying attention to them. So I was just saying that, it's different not having the fans there or having way fewer fans. And I don't know, it's just very different. I know that everybody misses normal shows and normal wrestling, normal everything, but I'm at least trying to get used to what we have now, and I'm trying to, be grateful for any opportunity that I do get, because like I said, they are few and far between.
So to even go off of that, because I do think that, obviously people are still seeing you, they're just not seeing you in person as a wrestler.
Right.
WTV is very helpful in that regard. Also, I think Limitless is now on Facebook. I think it's on YouTube. So obviously people who don't have IWTV, which you should get if you're an independent wrestling fan, it's really wonderful. The promotions they have, you still can watch a bunch of Limitless wrestling relatively for free.
Yep.
So I'm throwing that out there. But to even go off of that question too, is that where do you think it's all going? Because obviously we're entering the winter months. COVID is sort of spiking back up. Hopefully, the vaccination is going to roll out and be very successful, and that it's slowly going to be implemented. But I am a very pessimistic person, which means I'm always right. I have a feeling that 2021 is going to look a lot like 2020 did, in that where I think it's going to be a lot of fanless shows. I think there's going to be fewer shows. And I also think that people aren't so willing to jump back into the fire in the next year. And it's nothing against that they don't want to watch wrestling. It's this idea, though, that we're coming out of a pandemic And I think people are saying, I'm not so ready to be around 100 people or 500 people or 300 people. And I come from the anime world, and I used to go to a lot of anime cons. There's a concept called con crud, meaning that if somebody had the flu, 5,000 people on Tuesday have the flu from that con. And obviously, there's not 20,000 people going to an indie wrestling show, but I think the same concept still exists. So I'm curious, before your dogs take over again, that how do you feel the next year is going to play out? Because I think wrestling's still going to be here. I just think it's going to be, sort of what 2020 looked like, just a little bit better.
Yeah, I think I see 2020 as kind of moving forward and kind of repairing all the damage that COVID did to everything. I think that shows will start up again, but it's going to be different. It's not going to be the same as it was before. I think it's going to be a while before it is the same as it was before. I was just watching. I watch a match, or at least so when I go to the gym, I do like 45 minutes of cardio before I lift, and so every cardio, I'm actually watching wrestling, and so I'm seeing all these people in the crowd, and I'm like, wow, it's just it's so I miss that, and so I think that 21 will be us starting to get back to that point slowly but surely.
Yeah, and I think that 2022 summer is really when we're going to get like 300 people realistically back. And in my opinion, it's not a vaccination problem. It's really just a question of when do fans feel comfortable to return. And then also it's how is, all these indie shows going to be set up? Are there going to be more caps on people? Because is everybody going to be wearing a mask? And all that stuff. And so obviously there's a lot of stuff, in my opinion, that has to be done to restore, fan credibility. Because, the way I view it is that if the wrestlers don't feel comfortable and a bunch of wrestlers don't feel comfortable already, how can you expect me as a fan to feel comfortable? And vice versa. You as a wrestler, you guys all know each other more or less in the locker room. I'm not saying everybody's, best friends, but when I go to a show, I don't know the person sitting next to me, and I don't know you personally. And so you don't know me personally. And there's very few wrestlers who actually know fans personally through a variety of methods. And so it's kind of, how do you, deal with that? And I just think that it's going to take till 2022 with the vaccination rolling out, also the warm weather and things like that. And also this thing is complicated, I think. Not to be negative, but I think that I think that applies for all of, entertainment as a whole. And that's why I think streaming is going to get bigger. I really think that.
Yeah, definitely. I think at this time, social media is huge. It's really, really big. And like you said, streaming. So, obviously I think that'll be a big part of the next year coming up. But I really hope that, by this time next year, things will be somewhat normal. But, just kind of have to roll with it at this point and see what happens.
Yeah, and having bring up social media, and we only spoke about one of your matches, which is the craziest interview. I've never had an interview where I spoke about one person's match, and only one match. So you're the first on that front. But I do want to give you an opportunity to promote your social media. Obviously, I think that Limitless really kicked off your career, and I think in many ways it drew a lot of attention to your Facebook page, your Instagram page, your Twitter. I know you have a Pro Wrestling Tees out there. So where can people find you on Instagram? Where can people follow your Facebook page? Where can people follow you on Twitter? Where can people pick up merch from your Pro Wrestling Tees? And I don't know if you have a Snapchat. I don't know if you do TikTok. I don't know what other social media stuff is out there. So whatever you have, feel free to plug it.
Yeah, so I have Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram right now. I'm not on the TikTok or Snapchat train yet for um, you know, my,
You're not on Clubhouse either, right?
I don't know. But my handle is the Jessie Nolan on all three of those. I probably use Facebook the least often. I am on my Instagram quite a bit. I'm trying so hard to use Twitter more. Um, but that's always been not my favorite. It's not I don't have I it's not that I don't like Twitter. It's just like I never know what to tweet. So, um yeah, I mean, I'm definitely going to be trying hard to put more on my social media in the next upcoming year and gain more of a fan base. So, and like you said, I do have a pro wrestling tees store right now. I just have one shirt that I actually really love. And I'm going to be hopefully getting some more designs in there and maybe selling some things independently. But yeah, I will definitely be hyping that up on my social media when the time comes.
Well, on that note, I think that's a perfect place to end. But I've been saying this with every single interview, and it rings true more so with you than anybody else. Is that you have to support indie wrestlers. You have to support people when they're just starting out. You have to support people you like, people you want to see, and that support can come in many, many forms. Obviously, the first one is economically. If you like Jessie Nolan and you want to see her more and you want to see her wrestle, and you have the money around for a $25 T-shirt, give or take, you should obviously be doing that first and foremost. If you have the money, it's not going to hurt your family. Obviously, if you're in a tough spot and COVID's beating you up, or you're concerned about making sure your four walls, your electricity, your water's on, your internet's on, you have shelter, the basic three, please take care of yourself first and foremost, because that is crucial in this time, especially as we go into the winter and we don't know what's going to happen in the next 3 months
Yeah.
with this virus and a variety of other stuff. But if you're in that situation and you have internet still, and you're on social media, there's three options to follow somebody. And obviously, you should be doing all three of those options: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. But some people love Twitter, some people love Facebook, some people love Instagram. And those are the big three, and you should be following Jessie at least on one of them. And it doesn't really matter to me which one you follow, but obviously, I would prefer, and I'm sure she would prefer, you follow on at least one, because it is super important to support people on social media. And obviously, when I say support, I don't mean just follow. Give somebody a heart on Instagram, give them a heart on Twitter, give them a like on Facebook, comment on something. If you see somebody's match on the road and Jesse's wrestling on the road, tweet at Jessie on the road. It's super important for a variety of reasons, because it lets Limitless know that you're interested. It obviously affects algorithms. It gets people looking at other people's tweets and other things and a variety of other stuff. And obviously, same thing with Instagram hearts, and that's their entire algorithm is based on how much social attention something gets, because then it gets algorithmed out. So, and all that stuff is free. So if you're already on Instagram, it's not costing you any money, and legitimately with one heart that takes 30 seconds, if at all, probably actually takes 3 seconds now that I think about it. You could definitely change somebody's algorithm, and maybe they get 5% more notice. So obviously you should be doing that as well, and that is the minimum, and you should be doing both, because it is super important, as I just stated. And I'm rambling on, and I know that you have to support people in whatever way you can, and the more ways you can support them, the better off you're going to be. So that's my 2 cents on the issue, and I'm going to give you the final word.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. Like, right, like I said, social media is huge right now. And so, um, don't just go and follow me, but follow as many wrestlers as you can. Like, wrestlers are, I think, really trying to post more and give you insight onto like their journeys. I know that I've been doing that with mine. I try to put as much of my training journey as I can on my social media. I can even post more pictures of my dogs if you guys want that, because they're pretty cute. But yeah, so just go and follow people and start liking things because it does mean a lot to us as wrestlers and performers, and it's really great for us to get more eyes on us. And we are really grateful for the fans because, I think everybody always says that, like, we wouldn't be here without them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And so thank you for being on. And I think that is a perfect place to end this interview because I couldn't have said it any better myself.